Hello, my name's Dale Adams of Planning Ahead of Time, and I'm speaking today with Mike. Would you like to introduce yourself, Mike?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Mike Oppenheim, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona, in the United States. And where I live, we have one of the oldest hospice facilities in the nation. And so, about 6 years ago, I had an unexpected rush of free time, and I love volunteering. But I'd traditionally done schools and like inner city, centers and stuff like that. But something like a memory sparked in my head about my grandmother who had passed away with Alzheimer's when I was a little kid, and for some reason, that led me to investigating hospice. And then when I was in the hospice training, they said you have to pick a field. And so I picked dementia because of my grandmother. So I ended up volunteering at a hospice ward specifically for dementia patients. And, I saw the whole gamut, including people who weren't really suffering from dementia. They just had like enough money that they could kind of sneak their relative in. So, and that was actually good. That was positive for me because working with people and hearing their stories changed my life. And specifically to that point, it changed my life because I realized even though I accept death in other people and I'm good at counseling people with grief and as they die, I hadn't really spent a lot of time thinking about my plan for my end of life. And so that really got me thinking. And that's when I started a podcast called Coffin Talk. And the podcast is to promote awareness of death and planning ahead. So, to anyone watching this, first of all, if you have not planned ahead, start. Um, and second of all, don't be afraid to do it because even if you don't announce it or tell the people you love, they'll be thankful when you pass that you had a plan and that they know what your wishes were. So.
Do you think, obviously, from your experience, that you should be older or of a certain age before you start to put any plans in place?
That's a great question. I wouldn't say you need to be older, but I would say it would be a little weird if I met like a 17, 18-year-old who was doing it, just because I think it would show me that you kind of have like a glum outlook maybe on life. So no, it's not too early, but I would say what most people would consider old would be like, oh, 60 or 70. And I would say, no way. Like I saw patients in hospice in their 40s. I saw patients as young as 34, I think. And that's just hospice. That's not to say that there aren't people in, you know, unfortunately cancer wards and, other places in hospitals with terminal illnesses. We all saw COVID, and no matter what your opinion is on it, even if you want to politicize it, it did kill young people. It does, like, there are things out there. The flu does kill young people too. So, because of these stats that might scare you, I can't do anything about your fear and I can't do anything about your anxiety, but I can tell you that again, like not you, Dale, obviously, the people watching, your kin and your family and your friends will really appreciate it if you have planned ahead because you don't get a chance to tell them what you wanted and people want to respect you if you pass.
Yeah, I think for me, I believe that actually anybody of any age should do it. My children are in their early 20s and they've both put plans in place. We've had discussions about it. And I think because, as you say, you're talking really more about somebody who's got a terminal illness, maybe it's going sort of into hospice care or terminal care or palliative care. Whereas for me, we literally don't know. You step into the car, it's one of the most dangerous places to be. And things can happen so quickly. And one of my daughters went to university, and while she was there, I didn't really see her for sort of 3 years or not that
Yeah.
much. And therefore, at that point, I would have liked some information. Thankfully, obviously, she was fine, nothing happened to her. But had it have done, it would have been nice then to have known some of what she was doing and what she would like, because each stage of our life, we change our view. Before she went to university, her view would have been different. Her view is different to my other daughter's view. My other daughter sort of works with children. She will have a different view based on sort of the life experience she's having. And that changes as we go along, doesn't it? I've been to funerals and left them thinking, I'd like a wicker coffin that looked like that, if I, when my time comes. Or I didn't like that hymn, or I like this, or just the way that these things are held. And that's when I like to then write them down and make sure I've got something that other people can know about.
And it's funny because you're right. We've talked earlier about different cultures and their approach to death, and I think I was like very Western philosophy when I said it would be odd for a young person that young to care about it because that's just the bias from my cultural perspective. When I really think about it, no, it would be silly. Like, why would I deny I have a 2-year-old daughter? If she wants to come up with an end of life plan, I should encourage that, because I'm reducing her anxiety. I'm reducing the taboo. So actually, I'm really glad you brought that up. That's an excellent point, and kudos to your kids. That's cool.
Well, I think death and dying and sort of spirituality, or spirit and spirituality, has been discussed quite a lot in my house ever since they were little. So they've been brought up on it, really. And now I'm doing work in end of life services. Before it was more to do with spiritual work. So as we know, but with the coffin talk that you do, it's a family affair, isn't it? From what we've already discussed.
Yeah, it is. My wife and I started it in January of 2021, and my brother, who's a huge fan of everything I do, and we're very close, he immediately was like wanted to do more. He was our first guest, so he became our booking manager, and now he's also our sound editor, like air checker. So yeah, my brother books guests. I record the podcast and do the interviews. I edit the tracks. My wife listens to them. She makes the media and images for social media and all that, and we all just kind of run it together. And it's wonderful, and it's cool too, because I don't think my brother was as into the whole like end of life thing as I was, because I'm just the quirky weirdo in my family who's always been this way. And so it was cool to watch him like get into it. And we've always had spiritual discussions, but they've like elevated. They're at a higher level. And since he's interacting with each episode, and I am too, we can share like discussions about each guest, which is also fascinating.
So you've interviewed your brother, but you've also interviewed your dad, and most recently your mom.
Yeah, it was I saved my mom for 2 reasons. One, was very reticent to come on and do it because she doesn't like attention of that nature. And two, it's like for some reason it's easier to talk to my dad about dying than my mom. I'm sure a psychologist could tell me in 2 seconds, but it was like a little harder. And it's like it's also a little weird in America, especially like to ask your mom, like, what are your plans for dying? But that shouldn't be weird. And that's your whole point. And that's obviously now my point. And I think that's what I'm really, the vehicle is to deliver that message to people, that it shouldn't be awkward. I didn't mention this earlier, but, I love the Mexican tradition of Dia de los Muertos. Like they really actually think about dead people every year and honor them, and they treat them like spirits, like what you just said, which is cool. And teach their own. I understand atheism. We've interviewed plenty of atheists. We've interviewed agnostics. It's not about a strong opinion or a lack of opinion. It's about no matter what, metaphysics is a real subject. Like you have to think about the overall picture of you're here and you're definitely not staying. Like there's no evidence that you're staying. And even if you love Jesus, he didn't stay. He came back and left again. So like even that example to me is poignant. And so since you're going to leave and you're here, like you've been saying, I think it's really important to start that. So the podcast is like an opportunity to ask every guest. We have no planned questions except one, which is, what do you think is going to happen when you die? Yeah. And I think that's a good soft question. You could even ask it at a dinner party. It's not really like, are you going to die and you're going to die? It's not as in your face. It's just like, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. Well, I do remember you asking me that question, and obviously mine was, well, this is just a vessel that carries our spirit around, and when the physical body dies and can no longer carry on, our spirit is released, and our spirit is energy. We're energy. Energy can't die, it just transforms, and that, which is why psychics and mediums can tune into a different frequency and converse with the energy of your loved one or the person that's passed. So I can remember answering that question when I was on your podcast. But, so you've actually written a book recently in relation to psychics, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm a writer as well as a million other things. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, and so I've written a bunch of novels. I got an MFA, Master of Fine Arts, in creative writing, and that also led me to teaching and blah blah blah. But my most recent novel, which was published by actually a UK publishing house, so yay! I'm actually a huge fan of the UK. I used to teach and fly there all the time. It's what are they called? Vanguard Press, I think. I'd have to look it up. They're not, huge, but so my book is called Ardor, and it's about the world's most famous psychic, and he's young. and he hates it because he's a teenager and he doesn't want to be responsible. So it's about his journey of like not facing the responsibility of being a psychic, and then enough bad things start piling up that he has to reckon with his what I call dharma, not in the book but in a conversation, which is like, you know, his destiny, what he's actually supposed to do here on Earth. And it's dedicated to my son. And there's a lot of podcasts where I talk about my son, but he doesn't live with me, and it's not by choice, and it's not by anything I did wrong. I'll leave it there. If you go to my website, mikeop.com, you can read the story. But the point is, I wrote it to release a lot of the stress and other thoughts that I was having about the alienation from my son. And so it's dedicated to him, and it's not about him, obviously, but well, maybe he's psychic. But I did have a very profound psychic experience once that got me into the idea of it. And then I researched a lot of psychics, and I can say that for every 15 to 16 charlatans, there is one legit psychic in your community. I'm sure of it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, very, very interesting. May I ask what your experience was? Because as you know, I actually work as a medium, but what was your experience, your psychic experience?
Yeah, it was, I knew with certainty that my son was going to be separated from me, even though I had no evidence or reason. Well, I had a reason, but I had no, and it wasn't a psychic message that said, this is how it will happen. It said, this event must happen. How you react, respond, and deal with it is entirely up to you. And so that's what led me to have the free time for hospice, for example. So I tried to like really, you know, do the aphorism of turn lemons into lemonade. And but what was chilling about the psychic experience is that it wasn't like a movie scene. It wasn't as profound as I think people want to hope they are. It was actually just this sure sense of knowledge. And ever since then, I now understand it's just intuition, and your intuition isn't psychic or not psychic. It's just your intuition. And sometimes it's leading you and telling you about the future. I have a lot of theories on this. You know, I think like humanity can change its course at any given moment, but the majority of thoughts have to be leading it in that direction. And so right now, as we record this in December of 2023, you can see like the friction everywhere across the planet. It's not just in Europe, it's not just in America, it's not just in Asia, it's not just in the Middle East, it's truly everywhere. And we don't know how that's going to go, but our positivity will certainly make a difference. So, you know, that's a lot of the message in the book is like, I think like you said it better than I could, but your energy and your thoughts, they are energy too. And they don't go away. They go somewhere.
Yeah. And we're all connected. The energy.
Yeah, totally.
And as you said, I do totally agree with you with sort of, you know, if we can all have more positivity, more positive thoughts, that we can sort of lift the collective energy, which would help. It can't make it any worse, can it?
No.
What I meant to say earlier, you mentioned Mexico and Day of the Dead, and I've been to Mexico a couple of times, and from Day of the Dead, I actually introduced into the UK something called Night of Our Light.
Wow.
And really is because, again, the word dead is not taken well in the UK, and I didn't want something that used the word dead, so it was done as Night of Our Light, and we actually light sort of the local churchyards to me with hundreds of candles, and we don't want it to be a sort of a religious event. We want it to be a spiritual event. So I don't just want it to be in churches moving forward, but that they were the people that were allowed us to do it. And then we literally put candles all on the floor, up on the graves, into the church. People can come in, light candles, sit, have some reflection, and then we do a reading of names, and that happens on the 3rd of November annually. We've just done our 3rd year, and we're hoping to take on sort of more areas that would be willing to be part of it. So I thought, well, actually that leads me to talk about that, which would be nice to mention, Night of Our Light. So, and we've got a group with that.
That's incredible, and I'm, as always, so impressed by you, Dale. You're just like the river runs deep, as they say. There's a lot of channels to your being. I'm curious. You have children. Do they at any point were they like angry teenagers who resented your goodness? Were they like, "Come on, mom"? Like,
no, it's not all goodness. This element of my life and what I'm doing is goodness. But Yeah, it's not always been this way, and believe me, like everything, there's a yin and yang to it. So
Yeah.
I'm sure anybody who has all the goodness is definitely there's another side to them, which again the children do see, of course. So
Yeah.
as they do. So with your Coffin Talk podcast, people can join it if they work in the end of life industry, or is it if they have a story relating to end of life? What type of guests do you want on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're open to any guest. We tend to pick a guest because we've done 162 episodes, so we look for like an interesting occupation, a spiritual experience, or a strong opinion that has to do with metaphysics. So those are like the first three things we were looking for. But to be very honest, any person with a story to tell who wants to bring the same word, their goodness to the universe, I want to have them on the podcast. We're definitely not a platform for negativity. We don't ask like hard-hitting investigative questions. We're not trying to make anyone look foolish. It's the exact opposite. We want to, like you said, we're all connected, so we want to show how we're all connected. And that's why we have that one question: what do you think happens when you die? Because that is a universal question. Every person can relate to that and should be able to answer it. Not what happens when you die, what do you think happens? It's very different, you know?
Yeah. So if anybody who's watching this is interested in coming on your podcast, how do they contact you?
Yeah, the best way is my brother is our booking manager. His name is Sam Oppenheim. You can just say Sam because my last name is probably long, although there was a Hollywood movie made with my last name plus ER. So Sam Oppenheim. And the email address is Coffin Talk Podcast, all one word, at gmail.com.
Okay, that's lovely. And well, it's been really nice to speak with you again. I would recommend people listen to your Coffin Talk, especially obviously the episode that I did with you. And I do appreciate you coming and speaking with me this evening for our Planning Ahead of Time group. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale.